Welcome to Healing Medicine, formerly the Mindful Healers podcast.
This is the podcast for physicians and healthcare professionals who crave balance and purpose. If you want to rediscover your love for medicine and life, one mindful step at a time, you are in the right place. We are Dr. Jessie Mahoney
And Dr. Ni-Cheng, physicians who bring decades of experience in physician health and wellness and leadership to the wellness conversation. Like so many of you, we felt the exhaustion, the disillusionment, and the weight of a career that demands so much, often at the expense of our own well-being.
In this podcast, we explore mindfulness, mindset, and real, sustainable health and well-being strategies.
Not as another task to add to your plate, but as a way to experience medicine and life differently.
Each episode dives into practical strategies, coaching tools, and real conversations to help you feel more present, fulfilled, and in control.
When we are healthy and well, we become powerful agents of change.
If you're ready to break free from exhaustion, cynicism, overwhelm, feeling ineffectual and stuck, and rediscover joy and presence, you are in the right place.
A life and a career that truly fits you await.
Reminder that nothing in this podcast is medical advice.
Welcome to today's episode on lessons from watching the Eagles. Do you need to hear some interesting true stories from nature that happen to be related to eagles? Would you like to honor your authentic self with some wisdom from nature? And do you enjoy observing wildlife, or better yet, watching birds, namely eagles? Then this episode is for you. My intention in this special solo cast is to bring to your ears some nature, sharing about the big bear eagles and their chicks, and some lessons that I've learned while watching them. A takeaway for you is to remind you that nature is all around you. You simply have to notice. And in paying attention, you can learn from what you see. And ultimately, I hope this episode is lighthearted and fun for you in a mindful experiencing of nature type way. So I wanted to start off with some background about the big bear eagles. First of all, they have quite a viral channel online on YouTube that broadcasts directly from their nest. And also, there's a wide angle view, so you can actually sometimes see the eagles flying to and from the nest, along with some of the big bear flying squirrels that allegedly live in the basement of this very well built nest that has been there for many, many years. So, I wanted to share a little bit about the bald eagle because it did used to be on the endangered species list, in part due to the chemical DDT, which contributed to that endangerment due to the abnormalities that it would cause in the eagle's eggshells, resulting in widespread nesting failures. And it was actually the Pacific Bald Eagle Recovery Plan in 1986 that ultimately helped to repopulate much of Southern California, inclusive of Big Bear, with bald eagles. And so this conservation effort enabled the current very famous big bear eagle parents that thousands, tens of thousands of people watch every day, Jackie and Shadow, to thrive today. And so, according to the nonprofit and main administrators of the Eagle cameras that stream live 24/7 during the nesting season, I have loved also watching them throughout my day. This nonprofit is called Friends of Big Bear Valley. Jackie, the female eagle, the mama eagle, was born in Big Bear around 2011. And as you will learn, Jackie is very special as she defies a lot of the behavioral norms for eagles. The vast majority of eagles, after they fledge, leave the nest and are given basically a genetically driven mandate to wanderlust. That's actually what it's called. It's called wanderlusting, and fly far, far away on a journey of exploration and maturation, eventually leading to usually mating and raising chicks, having a family of their own. Well, Jackie, the mama eagle, seems to have stayed in the area around Big Bear and has made Big Bear ultimately her long term home. She is about 14 years old and she had a former mate named Mr. B. So, how did Shadow come to be Jackie's current chosen mate? Well, in a nonviolent confrontation, and apparently there were several of these, Mr. B and Jackie's current mate, Shadow, who is 2 years Jackie's junior, had a standoff in the nest, the current nest that's being watched 24/7 by the Friends of Big Bear Valley. So Shadow was a young junior eagle at this time, and he was quite persistent in simply staying. Like he would not take no for an answer, despite Mr. B and Jackie's attempts to drive him away time and time again. Shadow just simply kept coming and staying. And so Mr. B eventually left, and he actually has not been seen in the area again. And so Jackie accepted Shadow as her new mate, and he has definitely proven to be quite a wonderful partner to Jackie, as well as a father to the new eagles currently in the nest. So they fledged their most recent offspring, who was a female. Her name was Spirit, in the fall to summer of 2022. Last year, unfortunately, Jackie's eggs didn't hatch despite diligent nesting efforts. And this was actually the first time that I had heard of the Big Bear Eagles, and through this most recent tragedy. Fast forward to this year. So Jackie had originally laid 3 eggs, and 2 had hatched. And I started observing by tuning into the live stream around the time when the 3rd egg had pipped. And so pipping is the long, very arduous process where the chick basically single-handedly or single-beakedly breaks out of its own shell, literally. The youngest one, so the 3rd egg, had successfully hatched and joined its older siblings, who were by then about 4 days older. But sadly, due to a severe snowstorm, one of the older chicks passed. And now there are 2 funny. They used to be adorable, and now they are surprisingly quite big, almost as big as their parents. And they're also black/brown feathered, whereas they used to have very gray, fuzzy down hair and were quite small. Little eaglets. And the eaglets had personalities that really shone and were quite whimsical and brightened a lot of people's days. So at the time of the inspiration for the podcast, the eaglets were about 3 weeks old, but now they are a couple weeks from actually fledging from the nest, or basically flying away for their first flight away from the nest, which is very exciting. And it just reminds us that time really goes quite quickly and nature's going to keep going at its own pace, regardless of what's happening in the world. Now, also whimsically, at night, and I've enjoyed replaying some of the footage from this because it's actually really quite funny and whimsical and endearing to see little bright eyes that light up and scurry here and there at the bottom of the nest. And you can oftentimes see those eyes scurry up branches closer towards where Jackie is usually brooding at night. And these are 2 San Bernardino flying squirrels that visit the nest. And since they appear identical, the first one that is seen at night is named Fiona, and the second one is usually named Fast Freddie. So they live in the basement of this massive nest that's about 6 feet deep and 5 feet across. And they continue to add to this nest. So these San Bernardino flying squirrels love to scavenge on the leftover food from the prior feedings of the day. They are so fun to watch, and I highly recommend that you check out the Friends of Big Bear Valley video. And there's also a Word document that gets edited every day to update people on feedings, poop shoots, which are basically when the eaglets have taken bowel movements, sometimes on their unsuspecting parents. Like poor Jackie has gotten poop all over her beautiful feathers before, as well as when Fiona sightings have been seen. And oftentimes, when Fiona visits the nest, Jackie can't really see the flying squirrels because the eagles don't have great vision at night, but they can definitely sense them and hear them. And so, to protect the nest, Jackie will oftentimes wing slap, making her wings really wide and then slapping the sides of the nest to help protect the eaglets and also ultimately to help protect the nest. So it's quite fun to watch this, and it oftentimes happens in the middle of the night. So you can kind of reverse and back up the video footage to see when this happenings. So in my reflections from my mindful observations of this eagle's nest, I wanted to share what I noticed, and perhaps you might draw some wisdom or inspiration from the eagles. So what I've noticed is that no one is in a rush. So feeding, especially when the eaglets were young, particularly when they were just a few weeks old with their gray, downy, fuzzy feathers, feeding took a long time. And oftentimes there would be upwards of more than 10 feedings a day. And Jackie and Shadow were both so patient in tearing off the meat, offering the bite to the eaglets, and waiting for one of them to reach out their neck and capture that bite. Now the eaglets are big enough that they're starting to self feed and self hold on to the prey and actually tear the meat from the prey themselves. But before, when they were chicks, they were definitely mouth fed. Also, the pipping process, even just making that initial crack in the egg to literally come out of one's shell, it took sometimes upwards of several days to successfully complete. And I felt the urge to be like, why doesn't Jackie and Shadow just simply help the eaglet out of the shell? The parents could have easily picked up the eggshell and dumped the chick out. But ultimately, nature has its own pace, has its own timeline, and in teaching the eaglet some important evolutionarily survival techniques, the eagle parents, of course, through their own wisdom, let the eaglets pip themselves out of the shells. So they let the chick ultimately work itself out in its due time with no rush. So the second thing that I noticed was that the protection of the young, this instinct to protect those who are more vulnerable, who are smaller in size, is so strong in this eagle's nest, and it's so unconditional. I mean, Jackie and Shadow have been pooped on countless times already, and yet through their actions, they return to the nest time and time again and continue to take care of their offspring. The other lesson that I was reminded of was you ask for what you want to increase your chances of getting it. But if you don't ask at all, then there is a much higher likelihood that you won't get what you want. So, my specific example of this from the eagle's nest is that the chicks open their mouths to signal to their parents that they're ready for a bite of food. And literally, the San Bernardino flying squirrels that quote unquote egg Jackie on at night, and that she reminds them to stay away, as opposed to just letting the flying squirrel get all of the leftovers that it wants. So, nature is very adept at making sure it communicates with other aspects of nature exactly what it wants and what it doesn't want. So, we can definitely try to emulate aspects of nature in that way. The next lesson is to take care of yourself while caring for others. I think this is a lesson that has been repeated time and time again for me, and I was glad to be reminded of this while watching Jackie feed herself, actually, while she was brooding over the eaglets. So you can do both simultaneously, but I have noticed definitely that the eagle parents will continue to care for themselves and also each other while still being very adept parents to these new young eagles. The next lesson is to trust your partner. So if you happen to have a life partner or a close friend, you can trust that person such that they might be able to take on some responsibilities in caring for things that you are vested in taking care of, whether it be patients, children, elderly parents, house, car, whatever aspect of life that needs additional help. If you have a trusted other human being that you're in relationship with, whether it be a friendship or a romantic relationship or a life partner, learning to trust is so important. Delegating, and also protecting some time away from whatever task it is that you need help with, such that you can take care of yourself. So, the specific example I wanted to bring up was that Jackie and Shadow exemplify this partnership really well. They take turns bringing food to the nest, they help take turns keeping an eye out for any dangers, such as any other birds of prey that might be trying to sneak a peek at the nest. And also, they take turns brooding. So, Shadow would oftentimes brood over the eaglets as often as upwards of 4 or 5, 6 hours a day as well. Also, Shadow, the father eagle, would fortify the nest and bring new sticks, even if the sticks were sometimes kind of ridiculous to try to incorporate into the already very fortified nest. These sticks were sometimes like small trees that curved awkwardly and fit awkwardly into the nest. Next is that there is a trust in your home being warm and well made, and that the home that you have so diligently worked on to strengthen, to fortify, to make warm can withstand elements simply because you and or your partner together have made it with love, and it can be part of who you are. It can be an external representation of your authentic self. And then the next lesson is self soothing. So, this rocking motion, our instincts when we encounter babies and even toddlers to rock them as a means of comfort. This rocking motion can be seen in cats and other animals before they settle down into a comfy position, such as the eagles do before they sit atop their eaglets to keep them warm. So there are shared mechanisms of rocking across species to help comfort and self soothe. And so, thinking about what your self comforting mechanisms might be, and it might be as easy as something like giving yourself a self hug, like what's taught in mindful self compassion. And then the last, but I think the most important lesson that I've learned from watching the Eagles and I've been reminded of has been that everyone really does make mistakes. We are imperfect beings, all animals are, even as eagle parents. So, to give you kind of a funny example, Shadow, the papa eagle, was very much focused and in the zone of cleaning up the nest. The center of the nest, where it's the softest and the warmest, is called the nest bowl, and that's where the chicks used to mostly reside until they kind of outgrew that area. So Shadow was moving the carcasses of prior animals from prior feedings towards the periphery when he actually mistakenly picked up the youngest chick, at that time named Small Chick, but now named Gizmo, from the behind, bringing the chick upside down and airborne before the chick flapped a little. And then Shadow actually realized that it was indeed one of his offspring and not an animal from a prior feed. So, as we get so focused in our work, in our different tasks of the day, to not give ourselves such a hard time about making things perfect, because ultimately everyone makes mistakes, regardless of how diligent and how focused and how dedicated we happen to be. And that we can bring in some self compassion and perhaps some loving amusement to some of the mistakes that inevitably come up for all of us. So I hope that in listening to the story of the Big Bear Eagles, it's brought some whimsy, some lightheartedness into your life. And hopefully, I've inspired you or at least made you curious about some more ways in which you might bring nature into your day to day life. So, first step really is to just set the intention to do so. And then the second step is in making your home, or when you're at work, are your blinds open? Perhaps windows being open. Could that be a really easily accessible way to really just take a look outside? Notice what nature you can see already from the comfort of your own bedroom or your office or clinic or even hospital. Is there a picture of nature in your office? Maybe even a screensaver on your computer? Are there live plants that you can invite into your home, allergy permitting, into your clinic space, even? There are lots of different creative ways to bring nature of the outdoors inside. And then, are there also easy ways that you can be in nature? I've mentioned multiple times about my noontime walks between morning and afternoon clinic patients, such that I used to walk around the parking lot noticing the foliage. Now there are some red and purple flowers in bloom along the vines along the parking lot structure wall. I also noticed some butterflies as well. And then more recently, I've actually taken longer walks up to 30 minutes down the street from the hospital where I can actually see the ocean and where there's big hill ascents. So, actually giving myself quite a good cardiovascular workout too. And all this within steps outside of my clinic office. So, being creative and not being afraid to explore preconceived boundaries, and going beyond that, and just letting curiosity drive where your attention goes, especially when it has to do with nature. So, As always, I like to close with some reflection questions for you at the end of episodes. The first one is, what aspects of nature capture your attention? Might you explore that curiosity about nature a bit more? And how might you do that? Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll definitely include the links to the Friends of Big Bear videos of the eagles and also their ongoing Google document that updates everyone on the happenings at the nest. I hope that you will take some time to enjoy the eagles as much as I have and be inspired by them, by their fortitude, their resiliency, their wisdom. And ultimately, it's just fun. It's just fun to notice them and to see what they're doing. If you haven't already joined us at the Mindful Healthcare Collective, please do so. If you happen to be a healer, we have ongoing offerings, usually of Jessie's weekly yoga sessions and some mindful posts to help you be reminded to include mindfulness into your day to day life. If you'd like more formal time in nature with the inclusion of mindfulness, please check out one of Jessie's retreats, or if you need speakers, workshop leaders, retreat leaders that can facilitate mindful nature experiences, let me and or Jessie know. We are happy to help. Thank you for joining us. Be sure to stay on after the sound of the singing bowl for our mindful moment offering to practice.
Please check the show notes for additional resources and insights, and please explore our other episodes.
If our message resonates, we'd love to connect further. Please share this podcast with colleagues, friends, and family members. And remember, when you work with us, you don't just consume information, you create real change.
We offer coaching, mindfulness experiences, workshops, retreats, and talks. Visit healingmedicinepodcast.com to learn more.
Please note the content of this podcast is not medical or life advice. Always participate in our mindful moments safely. Welcome to this mindful moment offering. If it's safe for you to do so, inviting you to actually go outside. And if you can't for whatever reason, inviting you to look outside. First, by noticing what you see, noticing colors, noticing different movements that you see in nature, perhaps because of wind. Are you able to hear any aspects of nature? And if you happen to not be able to open a window and it's quite silent, then acknowledging that, because silence is then part of your direct experience and truth. Seeing what captures your attention. Could it be just a leaf that you're noticing, or a blossom, or perhaps a critter like a butterfly or other insect that might be walking or flying by? Seeing if you can notice the textures of it, the colors, the shapes, and just ultimately getting really curious about it. What specifically about this particular object in nature is capturing your attention? Noticing if any judgments are arising, or if you're already bored with evaluating and looking at this object and wanting to move on to something different, noticing that attention wanting to drift. noticing that you have a choice. You can continue to explore this particular object in nature, or you can shift your attention to something else and explore it in a curious and mindful way. So, inviting you to use this nature exploration exercise whenever you'd like to notice a little bit more nature in your day to day life. You don't have to be in some sort of exotic location. You simply just have to pay attention to some aspect of nature. Oftentimes, there's something right within your eyesight or your hearing that will capture your attention. Thanks so much for practicing with me today.